So often, players try to drop weight too quickly in the pre-season and end up feeling run down or injured. This can then often lead to more weight gain than previously happened before. In this video, I'm going to talk you through a few steps that can stop this from happening and reap all the benefits of how weight can be lost in a safe and healthy manner. The last point I'm going to touch on here is what I don't actually find it super common. It does pop up from time to time, and it's not just in athletes but in general population as well, is around people trying to lose weight but trying to do it too quickly. And to tie in the last point there on people trying to put on weight, doing either too quickly will often be an issue. I was in a discussion with a few other coaches. It was around the time of COVID, and they were talking about the rugby player Jacob Stockdale and how he's put on too much weight, he's not able to move as freely as he used to be. I don't think it was the fact that he'd put on weight. I think that it was the rate of change and how quickly he'd put on the weight he was struggling to cope with. And I've seen this in players before, that they do a big winter of putting on loads of weight, and then when they come back out on the pitch to play, they're not quite sure how to use it all. And that has the various knock-on effects of just not knowing how to use this new body you have. Doesn't have as many, I suppose, general, if it's done for the right reasons, general health complications. Whereas trying to lose weight too quickly will have knock-on impacts on performance, but also on general health as well. And some of those are like just the injury and illness that are going to be the main ones if you're trying to lose weight too quickly for a long period then as well. A story of, so when I was working inter-county, we had access to DEXA scans, and one of the players dropped from 13% measured by DEXA down to 9% over like a 3-month period. I thought this is on the risky end of already being reasonably lean, down to 9%, which is very lean, measured via DEXA for inter-county players. But he was just afterwards, and I remember the manager saying, "Oh, great work here," to him for losing it, but also to me for saying, "Oh, you worked with him really well there to lose weight." And I was like, I didn't actually try and help him lose weight. I thought he was performing quite well beforehand. And he ended up spending the rest of the season constantly injured and low on energy, because the reduction in calories required to go from 13% to 9% was a lot, and he found it really hard not to keep doing that then afterwards. He was looking at how much food he was eating. He was weighing himself a lot more to try and keep weight low, without realising that coming into big championship time, you need to carb up more, have more fuel on board, because that's what allows you to, number one, perform, but also number two, recover from all the performances you're doing. And he just wasn't doing that. Leaner doesn't always mean better, especially if it's achieved too quickly. And I know there's a lot of messaging here on the quickest way to get faster, particularly in sprinting, is to reduce your body fat. But that entirely depends, number one, how quickly you're doing it, but also on what your body fat was at the start and how quickly you go about losing it. There's the big obvious issue with over the long term with relative energy deficiency in sport. Sometimes seen as more common in females, but I think it's every bit as prevalent in males now, just maybe not as talked about. And that leads to all the various issues that come with that around injury, illness, everything that way. But also how your relationship with food can change a lot if you're constantly dieting. If you're thinking I need to find the lower calorie option, I need to feel a little bit hungry so I'm not getting fat, it just changes your perspective, your relationship with fueling, and has loads of knock-on negative effects then around how much you're going to get on board to use in performance. I'll be very careful about saying this, but weight loss and performance can have a direct impact on performance in some sports. The most obvious ones here are cycling and running. So if you think of cyclists who cycle up hills, if they can put the same power, but they're lighter, going up the hill, they'll go up faster. Same around running. If you're doing middle to long distance stuff, a slight drop in weight while maintaining the same fitness will generally allow you to run a little bit faster. Some people will suggest rules like a kg will lead to 2 meters per second faster over a kilometer. There's no hard rule that way. You can't say that's the case. But it's such a blunt force approach to trying to improve performance, and it's also really difficult to build on then in the future. If you do a really good training block and get an improvement in performance from that, you can build on that again by doing another good training block. If your approach to improving performance is to drop a bit of weight, you can't really build on that again, because if you try and drop more weight the next time for the next performance, it's more than likely going to be eaten into muscle mass, energy availability, everything that way, as opposed to training, which compounds on itself over time. It's also just not going to work realistically more than once, and something you shouldn't see as one of the main steps to improve performance in any sport, really. Some of the pitfalls of not eating enough. So obviously there's just not enough total energy in your body. And while talking about calories, like, calories aren't a good thing or a bad thing. They're just a unit of measurement of energy. If I was to measure someone's height, I do it in centimeters. It's the same for energy. It's just measured in calories. They're not good or bad. They're just how we measure. Too little foods will lead to lower hunger or more hunger, crankiness, and just lower concentration in general, not just in performance, but also day to day, and can have a big impact on your mood. If you're looking at not eating enough food, particularly during the day, that can then lead to just this big hunger there in the evening, and you end up eating a load. Like around dinner, you're cooking dinner, but you're snacking as you're cooking dinner. You eat the dinner, and then you're like, oh, I haven't eaten much today, I can have a snack now afterwards. And that just can lead to, I don't like saying binges, but just large volumes of food in the evening time, and will often have the net knock-on impact of you end up eating as many calories as you would have had you just had a decent breakfast, lunch and snack throughout the day. The other impact of this is, or instance that happens, is you do that all week, like eating very little Monday to Friday, then Saturday or Sunday comes and you're like, oh, my calories have been low all week, I'll just eat loads now, I'll get a takeaway, I'll have some alcohol, I'll have a few like big bags of crisps and snacks, and average out over the week, you still end up eating the exact same amount of calories as you would have had you just had decent meals all week and felt quite full from them, as opposed to this big, again, I don't like saying binge at the weekend, but just large volume of food in one day or one evening or one sitting. It's worth being mindful as well that there are daily fluctuations in your weight. Like, it can be impacted by loads of things. If you're looking at the scales every day, again, you shouldn't really weigh yourself every day, but it is worth monitoring over time. Carbohydrates, salts, some liquids will just lead to your weight going up or down. There's no gain or loss in fat. It's just the carbohydrates and salt particularly will hold on to a bit more water in your body, hence leading your weight to go up. The time of the month will also have a big impact for females. There will be fluctuations in weight based on what stage you are at of your menstrual cycle. The increased carbohydrate and salt that you might have coming up to like a big performance like a match, that's not going to be a change in fat. It's just weight that's there. That's also going to be fuel for you when you go out in a game. So if you do feel like a little bit bloated or a little bit heavier coming up to a game, it's because there's extra energy there ready to be used. It's not a change in fat in any way. If trying to drop weight, I generally would recommend seeking out the advice and guidance of a professional, but here are a few strategies that can help along with that. The first one I'd say is try and be as consistent as possible within reason around what it is that you eat. So having like similar meals day to day, because they're easier to track, they're easier to manage, and they're a bit easier to manipulate. And while you don't need to eat the exact same foods every single day, like people do generally eat quite similar stuff for breakfast, lunch, snacks, and then just kind of alternate their dinner slightly. But if it follows a similar pattern day to day, it's easier to use some elements of portion size or whatever it is that way. Try and track your weekly weight as opposed to your daily weight. Now, you can weigh yourself a few times a week, but it's generally more important to see how you are Tuesday to Tuesday to Tuesday than Tuesday to Wednesday to Thursday, because it's a more accurate record of how you're progressing over the long term as opposed to day to day. Try to have a reasonably high daily activity, i.e. like aim for your 10,000 steps. Don't spend all day sitting down. You don't want to like exercise all of the extra weight off, but just generally high, low intensity daily activity can be a useful way to manage calorie deficits. Don't use high intensity exercise to burn extra calories. If you're doing any type of high intensity exercise, do it for the training adaptations that come for this, the fitness benefits that come from high intensity training. You still need to fuel up for those to get the good benefits from them, as opposed to saying, I'm going to go really hard here now because it will burn more calories. You're generally not going to recover from those. You're not going to get benefits from them, and you end up being a lot more tired in the longer term. Try, where possible, to avoid liquid calories, smoothies, juices, alcohol, whatever like that. It's just too easy to get a lot of calories on board that don't really leave you feeling that full. Fill up your plate with salads and veg. Bulk them up, fill up your belly alongside some high quality protein and enough carbohydrate to fuel whatever it is you're doing. On the carbohydrate point, Don't eliminate them. Don't cut them out. You still need them to fuel the majority of what you're doing. Just look at managing and controlling your portion size. I can't say exactly how much you should have in each plate because I don't know how active you are, what size you are, how much you generally need. But just look at slightly reducing portions, but still providing enough to fuel whatever trend you're doing. Look at situations where you're likely to overeat and try to manage them. So if you generally have a takeaway on the weekend, you don't need to cut that out completely, but just try and have a smarter option there. If you tend to eat a lot extra when you're hungover after alcohol, instead of going out for a breakfast roll, try have some turkey, the sausages and medallions in the house and have that, as opposed to going getting the massive roll. If you're used to having a movie night and eat a share bag of crisps on your own, don't cut it out. Have a lower calorie option or have a bowl and put a reasonable portion size in the bowl, and once the portion size is gone, that's it, you're done. If you tend to eat a lot of extra food at parties, try and eat a high protein meal beforehand so you're a bit fuller going, but then also put the food on a plate instead of constantly picking at stuff without realising you've just eaten a load. You don't need to cut out sweet stuff and treats, just have some lower calorie options like the fun size bars, the Freddo bar, small bits that you can break up and have and spread out over a few days as opposed to the big bar. Or if you're someone who just finds it easier to cope with not having sweet stuff at all, fair enough, but just be mindful not to have the big binge on a load of chocolate or sweets when you do have some. And this will be different person to person there, how they manage having a small bit regularly or just cutting it out for a period of time. You want to try and look on it as a gradual lifestyle change to be healthier as opposed to a diet with a defined beginning and end. If say my target is to make this weight, and once I've made that weight, I'm done, so you can go eat whatever you like after that, as opposed to just looking for healthier ways to live with reduced portion size but still fueling for whatever training you're doing, and set it up to be a long-term approach as opposed to a short-term fix. You shouldn't be in a calorie deficit for too long because it's just really hard to cope. You'll end up with reduced mood, reduced energy, find it really difficult from recover at and you're doing. You need to have little breaks there where you spend a couple of weeks at a time, if you are losing weight, to just get used to that new weight, and then try and find how much can I possibly eat in terms of larger amounts to maintain this weight. And it's worth finding where that is so you understand where your baseline in terms of weight but also total calories are before you potentially look to lower it again after that. A couple of little guidelines I'd say here, if you're looking from a management point of view, I've seen this done a few times. Don't try and shame, definitely don't try and shame players into losing weight. I've seen players or managers group players together for skin folds or weigh-ins, and they always put one heavier player with three really good shape players, so they feel oh, these lads are in really good shape and I'm not. That has a net negative effect in the long term, not a positive. They'll generally just end up being put off coming in general, as opposed to it having the impact of here's the motivation for me to be more ripped like these lads. It doesn't work like that. Don't ban certain foods in the group or say oh, you shouldn't eat this at all. Don't give that message on good or bad foods. It's just where they may be useful in different contexts. Get professionals in. I did a study a few years ago, it was published on nutrition knowledge and hurling players, and we found that the players with the worst nutrition knowledge weren't those who had no guidance whatsoever on nutrition, but it was actually those who had received guidance from management with no prior background in the area. So it makes me question what kind of information was given out there that's led to these players having the worst overall nutrition knowledge as opposed to people with no guidance at all. If you found any of this stuff useful, feel free to get in touch. We can chat through a few bits around helping issues with some of your players, referring out to professionals in your area or anything like that. And if you have any specific nutrition related questions, feel free to submit them. I do hope to do more rapid fire nutrition related Q&A in a couple of weeks' time.